The injuries keep mounting, and it's putting a squeeze on all of our early round draft picks. This makes start-sit conundrums all the more important. Today, we are continuing our love-hate series as we look into 3 players I'm trying to start everywhere and 3 players I'm trying to sit. But before we dig in, head over to 4for4.com and use promo code YouTube to get yourself 25% off any subscription plan. Start J.K. Dobbins. The more I think about it, the more I've talked myself into being completely into Dobbins for the rest of the season. He has an injury history as long as anyone in the league, but it's almost impossible to ignore what he's done up to this point. A huge reason for that is his offensive line, and it really comes as no surprise that they're gelling this quickly. Rashawn Slater was already one of the best tackles in the league, and it seemed inevitable that Joe Alt was going to get up to speed quickly after an incredible college career. But maybe we didn't realize it was going to be quite this fast. The tackle tandem looks fantastic right out of the gate, and the line as a whole is moving bodies with ease in front of the stellar J.K. Dobbins. The Chargers sit in 9th place in adjusted line yards at 4.86 already, but they are far and away the first-ranked team in running back yards before contact at 3.32. To put that into context, the Dolphins easily led the league in that metric last season, posting a 2.34 line. Some regression is going to hit at some point, particularly the Dobbins' outlandish 9.9 yards per attempt, but I'm jamming him into any lineups where I have him rostered, regardless of this Steelers defense. He simply looks way better than teammate Gus Edwards, and the team has made it clear that they're going to run the ball as often as they possibly can. Start Chris Godwin. We're going back to the well again here with Chris Godwin, but why back off when he's been nailing it from a fantasy perspective? We discussed his potential increased slot usage during the preseason, once again after week 1, and now after week 2, there is truly no denying that the coaching staff will be keeping him in a majority slot role. After last week, when he lined up in the slot on 78.3% of his routes, his percentage through 2 weeks is now 58.2%, far higher than the 37.4% he saw during his disappointing 2023 season. He has now seen 11 of his 16 targets out of the slot, a number that trails only Cooper Kupp, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. On those slot targets, he is averaging 16.4 yards per reception and 9.1 yards after the catch, according to a total of 164 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a perfect 158.3 QB rating for Baker Mayfield. While we're not going to project literal perfection from now until the rest of the season, he needs to remain in our fantasy lineups until it's proven that it isn't an incredible situation. So the Broncos secondary should give us a little pause after only allowing 268 passing yards through 2 weeks. We have to keep in mind that one of those games was against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who ran the ball 36 times. They will be up against far more volume this week, particularly if running back Rachaad White continues to struggle with stringing together positive runs. Godwin is an easy click for wide receiver 2, and you could probably play him as your 3rd wide receiver, considering where you drafted him. Start Rhamondre Stevenson. The Patriots passing offense has been an abject disaster through 2 weeks, looking quite similar to what they rolled out in the 2023 season. They've accrued all of 245 yards through the air, while Jacoby Brissett has been eaten alive by defending pass rushers. He has a league-high 44.3% pressure rate, while 2 separate offensive linemen have allowed at least 7 pressures. Right guard Layden Robinson leads his position with 8 allowed pressures, and his 92.6% pass blocking efficiency trails every other guard, according to PFF's numbers. Yet, with so much negativity bursting through the offense, Rhamondre Stevenson continues to eat. His 76.9% snap rate sits 6th highest among the position, bolstered by his 70.5 route participation, which lands behind only Bijan Robinson. While his efficiency behind this offensive line is still lacking, it doesn't really matter, as his 44.9 expected fantasy points lands behind only Devon Achane. His incredible usage in this still crumbling offense gives him a great fantasy floor, and he could have a ceiling to match if the Pats ever get it going. That's probably not going to happen this week against the New York Jets defense, but if he continues to get 25 opportunities this game, it's truly not going to matter. It's worth pointing out that the Jets did allow 209 rushing yards between Jordan Mason and Tony Pollard, so maybe there is a little more sneaky upside here than we're giving Stevenson credit for. Sit Alec Pierce. If you've been waiting to start Alec Pierce until he had a couple of productive days, I've got terrible news. You've waited too long. Through 2 weeks, the former 2022 second-round selection has 8 receptions for 181 yards, 2 touchdowns on 11 targets, holding the line for Josh Downs, who has been nursing an ankle sprain since the beginning of August. With Downs projected to hit the field in Week 3, it muddies the water for the rest of the wide receiver room. Though Downs will likely see far more time in the slot than Pierce has, the latter could get some time squeezed out if the team chooses to get rookie Adonai Mitchell out wide more often moving forward. Pierce is currently tied for the team lead in routes run with Michael Pittman, but if one of them has to come off the field, it's certainly not going to be Pittman. Regardless of a potential wide receiver rotation knocking Pierce down a peg, we're also faced with a difficult matchup against the Bears defense that has been doing all it can to counteract their inept offense. Prior to stopping any receiver not named Nico Collins in Week 2, Chicago terrorized Will Levis into accruing all of 127 yards. The leading receiver in that matchup behind Calvin Ridley's 50 yards was Tyler Boyd, who had 18. Pierce could continue to carve out a solid role throughout the season, but this isn't the matchup to test that theory out. Sit Samaje Perine. Great offenses all around the league have been taking major blows to key offensive pieces. The Eagles have A.J. Brown, the Rams, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua, the Bengals, T. Higgins, the Dolphins, Tua, and of course the Chiefs have both Hollywood Brown and now Isaiah Pacheco. It's important in our game within a game to pivot whenever possible, and grabbing backup running backs off the waiver wire is all part of that process. But as things stand right now, I'm not looking to start Samaje Perine even if I just picked him up. The process is solid, and I don't think there was anything wrong with adding the veteran this week, but I also don't trust him to score any sort of substantial points without a random check down score around the end zone. Perine has been active in both Chiefs games to this point, logging 17 snaps, all of which came on passing plays. This means he has 0 carries on the year to pair with his 3 targets. Carson Steele, on the other hand, is the only running back besides Pacheco to carry the ball, including his 7 rush attempts in Week 2. We haven't mentioned Kareem Hunt's recent addition to the team because it doesn't seem like that's going to matter for quite some time. Beat reporters have speculated that it could take a few weeks for the team to even feel comfortable with him being on the field in a game. So the way I see it is, Carson Steele will be the early down back, Perine will handle a lot of third downs, and Keontae Ingram will rotate in sparingly. We have seen Chiefs third down backs produce in fantasy, but no one is confusing Samaje Perine with Jerick McKinnon. One was a scat back with blazing speed, and the other isn't. Perine will see the field, be a good pass protector, and could haul in a few passes. Not enough to crack our lineups. Sit Courtland Sutton. It may seem like we're picking on Courtland Sutton here a little bit, but I'm going to advise that we sit him here for a second week in a row, and who knows about the future. There's no other way to put it. Bo Nix has looked awful through his 2 professional starts. Back in Week 1, Nix dropped back to pass 51 times, completing 61.9% of his passes. Though his average depth of target was a measly 6.0. His corresponding 3.3 yards per attempt were worse than anyone not named Caleb Williams. While under pressure, he completed only 30% of his passes, with 33.3% of them considered on target per Sports Info Solutions. Week 2 was quite similar. 39 more dropbacks, 2 more interceptions, and his 62.5 on target percentage from anywhere on the field, regardless of pressure, ranked 32nd out of the 33 quarterbacks who logged more than 3 pass attempts. This led to another poor performance out of Sutton, who somehow had a worse day than in the season opener. Sutton had 11 targets for 5.8 half PPR points in Week 1, following that up with 3.1 points on 4 targets. He was able to come down with 1 single reception despite running 37 routes. Hard day at the office. The team is basically not even using Marvin Mims or Troy Franklin at this point in the season, and there's still not enough to go around to make Sutton fantasy viable. You'd have to assume he will click with his quarterback at some point, but I'd rather it happen with him on my bench. There's not enough upside here to mess with it before the Broncos offense proves they are worth targeting.